so this is part 2 of the lecture on the Renaissance. And we were talking about the Holy Roman Empire yesterday. I believe that's where we finished. And I said it was Germany-ish. It's more than that. But the Holy Roman Empire was this huge empire. And Voltaire, who we're going to learn about later on, said it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. And it is in gradual, slow stages of collapse. And it's eventually going to be killed, this political Frankenstein monster, by Napoleon when he sweeps through there, I guess on his way to Russia, one of his Napoleonic wars there. And so it's still there, and we're not going to go into a big history where it came from. I never have done that. It's really not important. There's a whole lot of things in AP European history you wonder about, like the Estates General in France, that you wonder about, why do they do things this way? And you'd have to take ancient European history to know the answer. And some of these things I do know the answer to. Some of, I'm going to be honest, I don't. But it's not going to hurt you in passing this course. Anyway, so Italy is weak and divided, dominated by France and the Holy Roman Empire. So basically, how did they rephrase this? They said that Italy was the playground of foreign powers. It's not a country. And so France and the Holy Roman Empire play parts of it off against each other in their quest for power. And we're going to find out when we get to 1871 and Italy unifies, we're going to find out that the Italians finally have this master manipulator who comes along named Count Cavour, who is basically the Italian Bismarck, or Bismarck is the German Cavour. I call him the puppet master. He is going to orchestrate a war between France and Austria to benefit the unification of Italy. And I'm getting ahead, I know, but you need to understand this concept of balance of power and how countries play themselves off against each other. And Bismarck is going to unify Germany. The northern German states are Protestant and the southern ones are Catholic, and they don't like each other because of the religious thing. And so Bismarck looks around to try to find someone they hate more than each other, and it's France. So even in 1870 and 1871, in both those unifications, Germany and Italy, you're going to see that this competition between France and the Holy Roman Empire has been going on for centuries. Okay, and we're going to keep this is a theme we're going to come back to over and over and over. Eventually, there's going to be the Habsburg-Valois Wars. Now, I don't know if I've talked about in this class so far what a dynasty is. Dynasty is a family of kings. And the Habsburgs, now, this is another one of those words that there's more than one way to spell. Okay, I believe the correct spelling, if there is such a thing as the correct spelling when you're bringing it in from another language, maybe Habsburg, Habsburg. I think probably that's the way it's supposed to be spelled, and people pronounce it Habsburg. It doesn't matter. The Habsburgs are a royal dynasty that governed chunks of the Holy Roman Empire. I'm going to show you a map here in a minute. And also most of Spain and part of the Netherlands. I don't know if they have the Netherlands yet at this point, but they will later on. And the Valois are the people who control the French. Okay, so let's get this straight. So write this in your paper. This is basically, they control the Habsburgs. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the map. We'll come back to the rest of this. Here is the map that I want you to see now. Picture this in your mind here. All those brown lands are Habsburg lands. And so that big chunk there in the middle is the Holy Roman Empire. Notice it's not all brown. I mean, because it's in a state of decay and disarray. And it's eventually going to become Germany and some other countries as well. Austria, Bohemia, Czechoslovakia, whatever. It's going to become other countries later on. But you see all that brown. And you do see that the Netherlands up above France is brown as well in Spain. This is the Habsburg lands. The Valois lands are in green. So now, imagine that you're French. What do you see? What do you see? You see yourself surrounded by these people. Now, they're all Catholic, Of course, at this point in Europe, Western Europe, everybody's Catholic, but eventually they're going to remain Catholic. But eventually religion is going to come in when we get to the famous 30 Years' War. So you're going to see me referring to this map again and again and again. And most of you know that the AP history exams now have stimulus-based questions. I've taught under that system now for probably 5 years. I hate it. I prefer the old-fashioned multiple choice, where they just give you a map or something and you answer one question on it. And I have frequently in old AP exams, back in the early 2000s, seen released exams where they just put a map up here. They put this map up, and they had 5 back in the day. They had 5 multiple choice questions, and you had to figure out what was going on and pick that choice. And anytime you see this map, and they can still do it, as a matter of fact, on the stimulus exam you're going to take sometime soon, you're going to see a map like this. But when you see this combination here in these two rivalries, it's the Habsburg-Valois. Now, later on, that French dynasty, the Valois dynasty, is going to change to the Bourbon dynasty. And so it's going to be then competition between the Bourbons and the Habsburgs. But same people. So anyway, you got to get that fixed in your mind. Who are these people? And I think I just told you that. This is the beginnings during this time of modern diplomacy, embassies. And so the United States has embassies in most of the countries of the world. And what's interesting about an embassy, if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., they call these streets, a lot of them that have all these embassies lined up, Embassy Row. Like if you go by, I'm just going to pick a country, the Spanish embassy. If you climb over the wall into the Spanish embassy, assuming they have a wall, you're in Spain. And so let's say there's a serial killer in the United States running in Washington, D.C., running from the cops, and he sees the Spanish embassy or the German embassy or the Russian embassy, he can just go bail over the wall. Now, probably what a lot of those security guards will do is grab him. They don't want a serial killer in there either. Grab him, handcuff him, and hand him over to the D.C. police. But there's freaking examples where they don't do that. We've had spies working for us in Moscow get into the American embassy, and the Russians demand them, and we kept them inside the embassy. Sometimes for long periods of time, because if they walk outside the embassy, they're going to be arrested. So this is the beginning of the embassies, and the idea that embassies in a country have, they have diplomatic immunity. I'm getting way off topic here, but these are all words you need to know. But the beginning of this modern diplomacy is during this time period, the beginning of AP European history. All right, so what you see here is Italy, and what you see is it's a bunch of city-states, okay? And, eventually, they're fighting all the time. They're fighting all the time, and they're fighting all the time, whereas the French and the Habsburgs are fairly unified. So what you see here is just a collection of countries, really. And to get off topic, like I like to do to give you a deeper understanding, if you know anything about elections, and I'm going off into politics again, but I have to. This is a political class. Trump lost the popular vote by, I don't know, a couple million votes, I think. I'm not sure. You can look it up. And but he won the presidency based on the Constitution because of this thing called the Electoral College. Now, a lot of people are upset at the Electoral College, and that it exists. They say it, was a thing of the past. We should never have had it. It was a compromise to get the American states to join together and become a country. Because the word state, it was always confusing when I was trying to learn this when I was younger. The word state really means country. And so the United States was basically set up as 50 different countries. You're going to hear me say this a lot. Robert E. Lee, at the time he was, alive, he was a loyal U.S. soldier, fought in the Mexican War, and when the southern states started seceding, he was offered command of the Northern Army. He was considered the best general they had. He was offered command of the United States Army. And he basically said, I cannot fight against Virginia. And he frequently called Virginia his country. The Civil War pretty much settled the whole states' rights question. And so the deal is the United States was kind of set up as 13 different countries, and they had the Great Compromise to get them to come together. And so that is why this anachronism, a lot of people would call it, called the Electoral College, is there. And you see the same problem here. Italy is not unified. It's a bunch of city-states. And what did Abraham Lincoln, I keep bringing American history into this, say? A house divided against itself shall not stand. And so the deal is Italy is fragmented. And moving on. Here is the map I already showed you. I don't remember what the heck this is. I just threw some generic artwork in here. Hoovers could look at this picture and talk for 3 periods, and I'm not bashing him and say wonderful stuff. So this is Alexander the Sixth over here on the right, and this is some painting. I want to say this is called the Gift of the Magi, and supposedly these are people going to give gifts to the baby Jesus. I think that's what this is. If I'm wrong, I never said I knew anything about art anyway. And I think the significance of this picture, it's probably in your textbook, is that they are all painted, dressed in Renaissance garb. So that's what people dressed like back then. I'm sure there's a lot of other things you can pick out in there. I don't remember if I said I actually started this lecture, then it crashed and I had to do it again. This is Alexander the Sixth children, and I don't know, that is Lucretia Borgia on the right. Now, no one knows what she really looked like, and she's half topless in this. I covered it up. I covered it up. This is not, and never mind. But that is, I would say, Caesar Borgia on the left. But if you ever hear the way they pronounce it in Italian, it's actually pretty cool. It's Cesare Borgia. And who knows what he really looked like, too. But that is Alexander the Sixth kids. And lots of talk about Lucretia and Cesare. And remember, popes aren't supposed to have children, but that one sure did. Tangents. Go ahead and write this stuff down here. When I wrote the word tangent here, I have lots of old lectures. This was a newer one. Most of my lectures are pretty detailed with tons of facts. You may think this one is one of those. This is one of the newer ones I wrote. And when I say newer, we're talking like 5 years ago. I have been doing this class a long time. And tangents just mean this is just something interesting I wanted to talk about. It's not probably that important. I just like history. So there's this guy, who knows how to pronounce this? Savonarola, something like that. He was a priest, a friar, and they live in cells. That's his cell there. And I'm sure the comparison to a prison, the word being used for prison, is somewhat the reason why they did that. But of course, you see, looks like some kind of desk there. I don't think most prisoners have a place that nice. Anyway, he was in Florence, and he basically, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's fascinating. He took over the city. He was he condemned sin, which of course is what the Catholics, and most religious people do. I mean, some people have different versions of sin. I'm going to stay way away from that. But the thing is, he actually ran afoul of the Pope, and the Pope basically told him to knock it off. And being as he's Catholic, he's supposed to listen to the Pope, but he didn't. And he's in Florence. And at one point, he did this famous thing where he had all these people bring things like makeup and paintings and even apparently musical instruments, things that I guess would cause them to sin. And they brought them out, I think, in the public square and burned them. And this is famous for being the bonfire of the vanities. Anyway, he got caught up in the whole balance of power thing. It seems like he had allied with the French there himself. And basically the Pope told him to knock it off. And they came in and finally got him and arrested him, put him in jail or whatever, prison, whatever you want to call it, tortured him on the rack. This is a medieval torture tool down here at the bottom. And he recanted. And then they brought him out, him and 2 of his buddies, and hung him and burned him. And he's famous, though, mainly, I think, probably in a lot of contexts because of the bonfire of the vanities. And he's just someone that a lot of people are interested in. If you've ever read the Da Vinci Code and those books by the guy who writes all those and seen the movies, he shows up in the books as a pretty major character, and I wanted to throw him in. Anyway, moving on here. PowerPoint works clunky when I'm using this program. 1527, sack of Rome. So, again, this is a story I like to throw in here. It is important. It happens during this time in Italy. It's going to be significant actually in the next chapter. And I always teach this, and I find this fascinating. And then when we do the next chapter, I usually say, remember when we talked about, and kids, for some reason, don't remember this story. Anyway, Charles V is the Holy Roman Emperor. He's someone we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Some people call him the last medieval monarch. He's the Habsburg, okay, emperor. His armies capture Rome, and they go in there and they rob. I mean, they sack Rome. It's called the sack of Rome. They go in there, rob, murder people. I'm sure there's a bunch of other unspeakable things that happen. And I don't even remember so much what he was upset about, but he was mad at the Pope about something. And he went in and put the Pope under house arrest. Now, I'm sure all that probably means is he made the Pope stay in the Vatican in a very nice place. But that's not even the important part of the story. But the thing is, he goes and he captures the Pope. Now, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. This is important. Over in England, the Protestant Reformation is happening. I hope you already know what that is. The Protestant Reformation is happening, and there's a king over there named Henry VIII, and he is devoutly Catholic, and he's very critical of Luther. He thinks Luther should be executed, and he is so pro-Catholic. The Pope gives him this title called the Defender of the Faith, and that's a huge honor. For if you're a Catholic king, for the Pope to give you this award, it's a big deal. So Henry VIII actually writes a pamphlet against Luther. Now, I don't know if he actually wrote it or if he had somebody write it for him, but his name's on it. And he was condemning Luther, so he's an ardent Catholic. But then, and we're going to get into this next chapter, he wants to get rid of his first wife because there's a lot of theories about why, but the historical reason is he needs a son and she gives him a daughter. And so what he does, he writes the Pope. And now remember, the Pope loves him. Sends a letter to the Pope, or his people do, asking for an annulment. Now, an annulment is something, a lot of where your marriage is kind of like it never happened. And it's something that was done, I guess it still is, I don't know, I'm not Catholic, still done. And he asked the Pope for an annulment. And the Pope probably would have said yes. But here's where this gets interesting. The Pope is under house arrest. He's still getting letters and stuff like that. But here's the thing, that woman that is the name of the Pope, not that important. Henry VIII is married to Catherine of Aragon's. Hold on, let me get this straight here. I'm about to mess up here. Henry VIII is married to Catherine of Aragon, who is Charles V's aunt. And so, when this letter shows up, at the Vatican or wherever the Pope is, saying, hey, will you dissolve my marriage so I can marry this other woman? We're going to get into this later on. Anne Boleyn, the Pope, who probably would have said yes, who knows what he would have done, but most people think he would have said yes. Charles V tells him, no, you're not going to let this guy divorce my aunt. You're not going to let him turn her into, insert whatever bad word might have been used back then. And so he, I don't know if he denies it or he just doesn't answer. But this is going to be important because Henry VIII decides then, okay, I'll start my own church and I'll get in it. And he is. And so this guy who's a very loyal Catholic is basically going to start his own church, which is known as the Anglican Church, which is, related to the American Episcopal Church, the Church of England, whatever you want to call it. He's going to start his own church, and once he starts his own church, he's going to put his guy in charge, Then he's going to ask him for an annulment. The guy's going to give it to him. And he's going to go on and marry Anne Boleyn, who he's later on going to chop her head off. That is a Henry VIII story. So this is why this is so important. Italy is so weak, because it's a collection of city-states. They can't fend off an attack from the Holy Roman Empire, and the Pope winds up under house arrest. And if he had not been under house arrest, it's possible England, it's not just possible, it's likely England would not have turned Protestant. Okay? Anyway, that's all going to be in the next chapter, but just understand what's going on here. What does this cause? Well, there, already told you that. Moving on, intellectual change. All right. There's a guy named Petrarch, and he is obsessed with the classical past. And so in his obsession, he starts reading books that are over 1,000 years, that haven't been read for 1,000 years, apparently. And so he's reading these old, ancient Greek and Roman things, and he is known as, I want you to write this down, the father of humanism. Father of humanism, or the founder of humanism, that's the deal. So so this is a tremendous intellectual deal, and this is the beginning of when people in Europe start focusing on studying the classics. Just think about what you're getting here at Apopka High School. In a sense, you're getting a classical education. I mean, you're taking English, you're taking math, you're taking. It's not required that you take an art class, but a lot of kids do. You have room for 2 electives right now, actually 3. You have math, science, social studies, and English. You have room for 3 electives. And so you're getting pretty much a classical education, a humanistic education. And so this is the beginnings of that. So they're going to come along and say, hey, if you want to be somebody, if you want to be educated, you need to be knowledgeable with the writings of people like Cicero, this famous Roman who's been dead for centuries. And he supposedly, I guess, used the term Dark Ages. And there you get this, the liberal studies, the liberal arts and humanities. I went to a Christian school, if you watched my bio, and I never will forget, I had never heard the word humanities before. I mean, when I say I went to school in a redneck hometown, I am not kidding. But I remember I went to a community college first. I had to take 2 humanities classes, and I remember asking a friend of mine, I said, what is humanities? And he's like, oh, you'll hate it. It's all this useless stuff, art, music, poetry. And he goes, luckily, you only have to take 2 semesters of it. And so that was the first I'd ever heard of it. Never heard of it in high school. And I took 2 semesters of it. And then I transferred to this Christian school. And when I got there, it's what you call a liberal arts college. I had to take 2 more. This school required 4 semesters of humanities. And so, I make jokes about how little I know about art. I should know plenty about art because I took 4 classes in it. But probably because that good friend of mine prejudiced me so much against humanities, I just did the minimum. I'm sure you have classes like that. Hopefully it's not this one. But I just tried to do the minimum to get by. And so to work for a long time, the word humanities to me was kind of a dirty word because of that. Because it's just like, hey, I want to be an accountant. Why should I take a class in, music? But, there you go. Humanism. Now, here's the deal. This is the focus on humans and what they can do. Now, I want to make a point here. I really wish I was doing this lecture in person because, as always, I'm always worried something I say on video is going to be taken the wrong way. So, again, I'm going to refer back to this Christian school I went to. Back then, it's a fundamentalist Christian school. I mean, we had to go to chapel twice a week. We had to go to church on Sundays. And the words secular humanism were pretty big back then. And on this camp, it was pretty much considered a bad thing. They would spit it out. I use secular humanist. The end justifies the means. Situational ethics. And so I was pretty much biased against this word humanism because they basically taught us that humanism, and I'm not saying the professors did, but I mean, the kids around me basically taught us that humanism was anti-God, and that's not really true. A lot of these people, now I'm sure some of these people were atheists. Atheism, I don't think, was probably that common back then, but I don't know. I mean, they didn't do surveys. Certainly there were people who questioned why we're here and if there's a God or not. That's happened for centuries, and and people, we have minds, we question things, we want to know, is what we believe real? But so we were taught that humanism meant anti-God. Well, when I came later on, I went and got my master's degree, because there was, I think, 12 years between my bachelor's and my master's. I learned a different interpretation of humanism. And here's the one I think is more accurate. It is the focus on what humans can do. And it does not have, it can be, you can certainly believe this and not believe in God, or you can certainly believe in a different God or gods, but it's what humans can do. And so if you believe in God and you believe that God created man, and especially if you believe that God created man in his image, then it's not at all wrong. These people would say that if God created man, it's not wrong to say, hey, look at Michelangelo, look what he did, because according to that way of thinking, God gave Michelangelo the ability to create. So this theory, this idea of humanism, doesn't conflict with religion, at least my understanding of it, nor does it conflict with atheism. It means that man is the measure of all things. He can do a lot of stuff, and he can accomplish a lot of stuff. So I just want to tell you, as I referred to that professor that I disagree with, but I learned from, this is just an example in my own life of how my understanding of one word changed. Okay? And who knows? Maybe 10 years from now I'll come up with another definition, or I'll have a revelation or something on this word. So anyway, you don't need to know all the people they studied, but I referred to Cicero. Cicero was this Roman statesman, and he's quite respected amongst the intellectuals. And so the deal is, they really like Plato and they really like Aristotle. And so what they tried to do is they tried to merge these ideas. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the famous Greek philosophers, lived before Jesus was born. And so by definition, they couldn't have been Christians. How could you be a Christian before Jesus had been born? And so for these people who are taught that the Bible contains all the answers, and they believe, for many centuries, that scientific answers are in the Bible as well, they're having a problem, because these people they respect so much were not Christian by the literal definition of the word. So they spend this time, especially a guy named Thomas Aquinas, trying to reconcile these. I think maybe more Aristotle than Plato, but anyway, moving on here. Here's a famous book from the time. You will eventually get some stimulus questions to read. Frequently they quote this book by Pico della Mirandola on the dignity of man, about man is unique, he has free will, and he has a choice. And so these terms begin to affect the ideas on education. And again, you're affected by these ideas. And so if you know someone who's really educated, you can say, in all the things, they speak foreign languages. That's another thing. You hear a lot of kids complain, why should I take a foreign language? I want to be a plumber, a doctor, a lawyer. Why do I need to learn a foreign language? Well, you're getting, in a sense, a classical education. Anyway, you call someone who's highly educated and maybe speaks 2 or 3 languages, you call that person a Renaissance man or Renaissance woman. I guess now a Renaissance person. Moving on. All right, so as I told you, this lecture is not as detailed as most of my others are going to be. And there's a couple of famous things you have to learn with the Renaissance. And here's the first one, okay? It is a book, and you can go ahead and write the title down, by Castiglione, called The Book of the Courtier. Like I said, my PowerPoint does not work. Well, all right, so here we go. So here's what he said. Now, a courtier, I guess, was like what we would call a gentleman, but they hung around the royal court, hung around the king. And here's what he said. Basically, I've never read this. We're going to talk about The Prince here in a few minutes. The Prince I have read. And maybe I did read this. I don't remember it. I read a lot in that 4 semesters of humanities. But here's what a Renaissance man should be able to do, a courtier. he should be able to read and write poetry and memorize it. I still remember the poem I had to memorize my senior year of high school, Emily Dickinson, the short part of it. I never saw a moor, I never saw the sea, yet I know how the heather looks and what a wave must be. I never talked with God, nor visited in heaven, yet I am certain of the spot, as if the chart were given. I had to memorize that and say it in front of class. You have to be able to read and write and recite poetry. You need to be able to wrestle. You need to be able to sing. You need to be able to play an instrument. You need to be able to ride a horse. Not talking about Harley Davidson here. You need to know math. You need to be a talented speaker and writer. And so, again, we don't do all that stuff here. But I will tell you that in the community college I graduated from, we were required to take 4 PEs. And that was just and so I took golf first. And we never once went to the golf course. It was a summer class. We went outside and next to the gym and hit golf balls for like an hour every day for 2.5 weeks. It's a summer session. They have these abbreviated summer sessions. You'll understand all this when you go to college. I took racquetball. Oh my gosh, what a fun class. Can't remember. Archery. Oh, that was fun. Shooting bows and arrows all day. And then I took badminton. And I skipped class in badminton because I was trying to graduate when I was 18, and I did. I got my A when I was 18. So I took so many classes, I was busy, and it's still quite an embarrassment that I got a C in badminton. My friends would always, what kind of fool gets a C in badminton? But anyway, even in the community college I went to, the fact that we had to take 4 sports, and there were tests. I remember taking tests on the rules of racquetball. I've forgotten all of them, but I knew them for a time there. Anyway, it's classical education. All right, so this guy's important. You want to asterisk this. You want to underline this. You could get an SAQ on him. Now, let me see here. A lot of you don't know how AP exams work in the histories because you didn't have to do it last year. So I've got 3 minutes left in this video. Let me just say that on the AP World, AP European, and AP Push exam, you have multiple choice, which is worth 40%. You have a DBQ, I forgot the percentages, I want to say it's 25%. And then you have SAQs and an LEQ, I've forgotten the breakdown. And it used to be 4 SAQs, I believe it's 3 now. And Anshel and I pretty much agree, or at least we did, that the SAQ is the thing, at least in AP World History, that strikes terror in your heart. Because you don't know what's coming there. I used to think the LEQ was the hardest thing. But the last couple of years, my kids, that we did that, my kids did pretty well on the LEQs because they give you such a big topic. For instance, the Renaissance, that if you paid attention in class and your teacher's pretty good, you got a pretty good shot to do well on the LEQ. It's just the last thing on the exam and you're out of gas. And anyway, some of my, as I am recording this, I'm watching my AP World chat going on over here. And some of the kids are complaining there. I told them, the classes are 45 minutes long. I'm giving them 40 minutes worth of videos, and they're having trouble finishing. And they said because we have to stop and write down the notes. And so this is intended to be used for Wednesday. And so we're supposed to have a 40-minute class. So I'm going to stop here at 33 so you have time. Just let me say the last thing in this video. You better know Castiglione. He's, one of the biggest names in this chapter, and we're going to be talking about Machiavelli next. And even if you've never heard of, even if you don't know who Machiavelli is, I'm sure you've heard that name. So anyway, we're going to pause, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.